Humans are the weakest species in the galaxy. That's what every alien empire believed. No claws, no armor skinches, no venom, just soft, fragile creatures from a small blue planet. In the great alien markets, humans were laughed at. They were mocked. They were pushed aside. And one human woman named Sarah Cole knew this better than anyone. She worked on an alien world far from Earth, and every single day, someone reminded her that she didn't belong. But the truth behind this will shock you, because everything the galaxy believed about humans was about to change. And it would change because of one small moment in a crowded market. A moment nobody saw coming. In this story, you will learn 3 things. First, you will learn why screaming alien child, a child no guard and no royal nanny could touch, calmed down in the arms of a mocked human woman. Second, you will learn the secret about the human heart that alien science could not explain. A secret so powerful that the Emperor himself ordered it studied. And third, you will learn how one act of simple human kindness shook the throne of the most powerful empire in the galaxy, and why the Emperor's son refused to call anyone else mother. This is not just a story about aliens. It is a story about us. About what makes humans special when the whole universe says we are nothing. The people who laughed at Sarah Cole were about to learn a lesson they would never forget. And by the end of this video, you will see why some say humanity's greatest weapon was never a gun or a ship. It was something far more dangerous. Let me show you exactly how this happened. Sarah Cole wiped the sweat from her face and lifted another heavy crate of glow fruit. The twin suns of the planet Heir burned hot above the great market of the capital city. All around her, tall blue-skinned aliens called the Heirans walked past her stall. They were graceful. They were proud. And they did not hide their feelings about her. "Look," one of them whispered, loud enough for her to hear. "The human is still here. I heard humans can't even see in the dark," another one laughed. "How do they survive at all?" Sarah kept her head down. She had heard it all before. She was the only human worker in the entire market district. 3 years ago, she had come to Heir as part of a small work program between Earth and the Heiran Empire. Earth was new to the galaxy. Weak. Poor. Humans took the jobs nobody else wanted. Sarah sorted fruit, cleaned stalls, and carried boxes for a Heiran merchant named Audric, who paid her half of what he paid his own kind. But Sarah never complained. Back on Earth, she had been a kindergarten teacher. She loved that job more than anything. Then the economy collapsed. The school closed, and the off-world work program was the only way to send money home to her sick mother. So she carried the boxes. She ignored the laughter. She survived. That morning started like any other. The market was packed. Thousands of Heirans moved between the glowing crystal towers, buying spices and silks from 100 worlds. Then, just before midday, the noise of the market changed. Horns sounded from the great gate. "Royal horns! The imperial caravan," someone shouted. "The Emperor's household is passing through." The crowd pushed to the edges of the street. Sarah was shoved against her stall as rows of royal guards in silver armor marched past. Behind them came hovering platforms covered in gold cloth. The crowd bowed. Sarah bowed too. And then she heard it. A scream. It was high and sharp and full of fear. It came from the middle of the royal caravan. Sarah looked up and saw guards running in circles. Royal servants waved their long arms in panic. On the largest platform, a small figure was thrashing on the floor. It was a child. A little Heiran boy, no bigger than a 5-year-old human kid. His skin was pale teal, almost glowing. His large golden eyes were flooded with tears. He screamed and screamed, and nobody could stop him. A royal nanny tried to touch him. He kicked her away. A guard stepped close. The boy screamed louder, so loud that the crystal towers seemed to ring. Sarah heard the whispers race through the crowd. "That's the heir. The Emperor's only son. They say he has the burning sickness." His mind feels too much. Sounds, lights, crowds. It all hurts him. They say no one has been able to hold him since the Empress died. The boy rolled off the platform before anyone could catch him. The crowd gasped. He hit the street, jumped to his feet, and ran. Guards chased him, but the boy was fast and small. He slipped between legs and stalls, screaming, his little hands pressed against his head as if the whole world was too loud. And then he tripped, right in front of Sarah's stall. The little prince curled into a ball on the ground, shaking, crying so hard he could barely breathe. Guards surrounded him in a wide circle, but none of them dared to come close. Touching the royal heir without permission was crime. Even his own servants were afraid. The crowd just watched. Hundreds of tall, proud Vayrens, frozen. But Sarah Cole was not watching like they were. She was seeing something else. She was seeing a child. Not a prince. Not an alien. Just a scared little boy who reminded her of the children she used to teach. The ones who cried on the first day of school. The ones who covered their ears when the room got too loud. She had held kids like this 100 times. Her heart made the choice before her head could stop it. Sarah stepped out from behind her stall. The guards shouted at her. The crowd gasped. Someone yelled, "The human is going to touch him." Stop her, Sarah didn't stop. She knelt down on the hot street, right beside the screaming heir of the Veyran Empire, and slowly opened her arms. The market went silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Sarah knelt in the dust with her arms open. The little prince was still curled into a ball, shaking, his small hands pressed hard against his head. His golden eyes peeked out between his fingers. He saw her, a strange, soft-faced creature with orange hair, kneeling at his level. Sarah did not grab him. That was the mistake everyone else made. She remembered her training from Earth. When a child is overwhelmed, you don't rush. You become calm, and you let the child borrow your calm. So she began to hum. It was a simple tune. An old lullaby her mother sang to her when she was small. Soft and slow, like waves on a quiet beach. The sound was nothing like Veyran music, which was sharp and ringing like crystal bells. This sound was warm, round, gentle. The boy stopped screaming. His hands slowly came down from his head. He stared at Sarah as if she were the strangest thing he had ever seen. And maybe she was. Tears still rolled down his teal cheeks, but his breathing started to slow. "Hey there, little one," Sarah said quietly, in her broken Veyran. "You're okay. The world is very loud, isn't it?" "I know. I know it is," the prince's lip trembled. And then, in front of 300 royal guards and 1,000 shocked Vayrans, the heir to the greatest empire in the galaxy crawled into the arms of a human fruit carrier. The crowd gasped so loudly it sounded like a wave crashing. Sarah folded her arms around him, gentle but steady, the way you hold something precious. The boy pressed his face into her shoulder. His small body was burning hot, and she could feel his hearts. He had 2 of them, beating fast like little drums. She rocked him slowly, side to side, still humming, and the screaming child of Veyra fell quiet. Captain Dren, the head of the royal guard, stood frozen with his weapon half raised. For 6 months, since the death of the Empress, no living being had been able to touch the young prince. The best royal doctors had failed. The Empire's greatest minds had failed. Priests, healers, machines built to soothe the royal mind. All of them had failed. The palace called his condition the storm sickness. His senses were too strong. Every sound was a scream. Every light was a fire. Every touch was a burn. But somehow, the touch of this human was not a burn. "Captain," a guard whispered, "should we arrest her?" She touched the air. "The law says—" "I know what the law says," Dren said slowly. He did not lower his weapon, but he did not fire it either. Because for the first time in 6 months, The prince was not crying, and every guard knew the emperor's true command. The one above all laws. Protect the child. Heal the child. The boy sniffled in Sarah's arms. Then he did something that made the whole market lean closer. He looked up at her face, reached out one small teal finger, and touched her cheek. Soft, he whispered. It was the first word he had spoken in public since his mother died. Sarah smiled. That's right, buddy. Humans are soft. It's kind of our whole thing. A sound came out of the boy that no Veyron had heard from him in half a year. A tiny, hiccuping laugh. But the moment shattered. Horns screamed from the gate. The crowd dropped to their knees like falling grass. A shadow swept over the market as a massive royal ship descended from the sky, its golden hull blocking out one of the twin suns. The ground trembled when it landed. The ramp opened with a hiss of white steam, and down walked the Emperor Veyra himself. Emperor Kaldor was nearly 8 feet tall. His skin was deep silver blue, his eyes glowed pale gold, and his black cape moved like living smoke. They said he had not smiled since his wife died. They said his stare could end careers, end fortunes, end lives. And that stare was now locked on Sarah Cole. A human, a fruit carrier, holding his only son in the middle of a dirty market street. The emperor walked toward her in slow, heavy steps. The guards held their breath. The crowd pressed their faces to the ground. Sarah's arms tightened around the sleeping prince, and she did the most human thing of all. She looked the emperor straight in the eyes. Nobody looked the emperor in the eyes. Nobody. Veyron law said you bowed your head before the throne. Even kings from other planets stared at the floor when Kaldor passed. But Sarah Cole was holding a sleeping child. And on Earth, you do not bow while holding a sleeping child. You stay still. So she stayed still, and she looked up. The emperor stopped 3 steps away. Up close, he was even bigger. His golden eyes moved from her face, to her arms, to his son sleeping against her shoulder. For a long moment, he said nothing. The whole market held its breath. You touched the air of Veyra, he said. His voice was deep and quiet, like thunder far away. Do you know the punishment for that? Human, no. Sir, Sarah said. Her voice shook, but she kept going. But he fell, and he was scared, and nobody else was helping him. A guard hissed at her tone. The emperor raised one hand, and the guard went silent. 300 trained soldiers stood in this market, the emperor said. The finest minds of my palace have worked for 6 months. None of them could quiet my son. So tell me, what weapon did you use? It's not a weapon, Sarah said. It's a lullaby. And a hug, the crowd murmured. The emperor's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer and knelt down, lowering his giant frame so he could see his son's face. The boy was truly asleep. Peaceful. His small hand was holding onto Sarah's collar like he was afraid she might float away. Something moved across the emperor's face. It was fast, and it was small, but Sarah saw it. Painches. The kind of pain a parent carries when they cannot fix their own child. His name is Kale, the emperor said quietly. It almost sounded human. Then he stood, and the coldness returned like a door slamming shut. Bring her, 2 guards stepped forward. Sarah's heart dropped. The child stays in her arms, the emperor commanded. If he wakes and screams, it is on your heads, and that is how Sarah Cole, fruit carrier, the most mocked human on the planet Veyra, walked up the ramp of the imperial ship, still holding the sleeping heir to the throne, while 1,000 stunned aliens watched from their knees. The palace was beyond anything Sarah had ever dreamed. Floating gardens, walls of living crystal that changed color with the light, ceilings so high that small clouds formed inside the great halls. And everywhere, eyes, nobles in glowing robes, servants with silver collars, all of them staring at the human carrying their prince. The whispers started before she even reached the second hall. Is that an earthling? It smells like fruit crates. The emperor has lost his mind. Bringing that thing inside, a tall noblewoman named Lady Vess stepped into Sarah's path. Her robes glittered with gems from a dozen conquered worlds. She looked at Sarah the way someone looks at mud on their shoe. "How much did they pay you to perform this little trick?" "Human," Lady Vess said, smiling without warmth. "Did you drug the child? You can tell us." "Your kind will do anything for coin." Sarah said nothing. She had 3 years of practice saying nothing. But then little Kale stirred in her arms. His golden eyes opened halfway. He saw Lady Vess looming over them, and he felt Sarah's arms get tense. The boy turned, pressed himself closer to Sarah's chest, and spoke in a small, clear voice that echoed down the crystal hall. "Go away. You're loud and you smell like cold." Lady Vess's face turned a darker blue. Somewhere behind a pillar, a servant snorted with laughter and quickly turned it into a cough. Sarah bit the inside of her cheek to keep her smile from showing. That night, the palace doctors ran every test their science had. They scanned Sarah's hands, her voice, her brain. They found no tricks, no drugs, no hidden machines. The lead doctor stood before the emperor with a face full of confusion. "Your Majesty, we have a theory, but you will not like it." "Speak," said the emperor. "The human's body is warm. Her heartbeat is slow and steady. Her voice sits in a low, soft range our people cannot produce. To the prince's storm-touched senses, our world is fire and knives. But this human," the doctor paused. "To your son, your Majesty, this human feels like shelter." The emperor was silent for a long time. "Prepare a room for her," he finally said. "The human stays." The weeks that followed changed everything, and nothing. Every morning, Sarah woke in a room bigger than her whole apartment back on Earth. And every morning, a small teal face was already peeking through her door. Kale followed her everywhere. He ate breakfast only if Sarah sat beside him. He slept only after Sarah hummed the lullaby. When the lights of the palace got too bright or the halls got too loud, he ran to her, and she would cover his ears with her warm hands and count slowly with him until the storm in his head passed. 1, 2, 3, Kale would whisper along, his 2 hearts slowing down to match her 1. The palace doctors wrote reports. The royal teachers watched in shock as Kale, who had refused lessons for months, sat quietly and learned, as long as Sarah was in the room. The boy was not broken. Sarah told them. He was not sick. His mind was just built differently, and he needed the world to be softer. On Earth, she said, there were many children like him. And on Earth, there were teachers who knew how to help. Then Earth, said the old royal doctor quietly, may be wiser than we thought, but not everyone in the palace agreed. Lady Vess had not forgotten the laughter in the crystal hall. Her family had ruled palace politics for 9 generations. It was her niece who was supposed to become Kale's caretaker, a position 1 step from the throne itself. Instead, that place was now held by a human who carried fruit boxes. So the whispers began to spread, and this time they were sharp ones, planned ones. Servants reported the rumors to each other in dark corners. The human is a spy from Earth. The human is controlling the prince's mind. The human is making the boy weak, soft, human. Lady Vess said these things at every dinner, in every garden, to every noble ear that would listen. And then she went further. One evening, Sarah was called before the Imperial Council. 12 nobles sat in a circle of floating silver chairs. The emperor sat above them on his dark throne, silent. Lady Vess stood in the center, holding a glowing data crystal like a knife. This human, Vess announced, has no training recognized by the Empire. No rank, no blood name. And yet she holds our future emperor every single day. I demand she be tested by the old law. The trial of the bond. A murmur rolled through the council. Sarah looked around, lost. What's the trial of the bond? The old doctor beside her went pale. An ancient test. From the warrior days, he whispered. A caretaker of royal blood must prove their bond is real. The child is placed in a chamber of storm. Flashing lights, roaring sound, chaos. If the caretaker's presence truly calms the heir's mind, the bond is proven true. If not, Lady Vess smiled. The fraud is banished, and the child finds a proper caretaker. One of his own kind. Sarah's stomach turned to ice. You want to put a 5-year-old in a room designed to hurt him, just to prove a point. That's not a test. That's cruelty. It is the law, Vess said sweetly. Unless the human admits she is a fraud and leaves tonight, every eye turned to the throne. The Emperor's face was stone. Sarah waited for him to say no, to protect his son. But the politics of the council were old and heavy, and even emperors carried chains. 11 of the 12 nobles voted for the trial. The law was the law. The trial will be held in 3 days, the Emperor said. His voice was flat, but his hands gripped the arms of his throne so hard that the crystal cracked. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Her door slid open, and little Cale padded in, dragging his blanket. He climbed onto her bed and looked at her with those big golden eyes. Lady Vess says you're going to leave, he whispered. Like Mama left, Sarah's chest ached. She pulled him close. I'm not going anywhere. Buddy, promise, I promise. Cale was quiet for a moment. Then he said, so softly she almost missed it, when I'm scared, I don't call for the guards in my head. I don't call for Papa. He pressed his ear against her heartbeat. I call for you. 3 days later, the doors of the storm chamber opened, and the whole court gathered to watch the human fail. The storm chamber was deep below the palace. It was built 1,000 years ago, when Veyran warriors tested the bonds between masters and their war children. The walls were lined with panels that could blast light, sound, and vibration at levels strong enough to break grown warriors' focus. For a child with storm sickness, it would be a nightmare. The entire court stood behind thick crystal glass, watching. Lady Vess stood in the front row, her arms folded, her smile sharp. The 12 nobles sat in their floating chairs. Servants, guards, doctors, and hundreds of palace workers crowded behind them. Word had spread. Everyone wanted to see the human fail. The Emperor stood alone, above them all, his face carved from stone. But Sarah noticed something no one else did. His hands were shaking. The rules were simple. Cale would be placed in the center of the chamber. The storm would begin. Lights, sound, chaos, everything his senses feared. Sarah would enter from the far door, 30 steps away. If she could reach Cale and calm him before his vitals hit the danger level on the medical screen above, the bond was proven. If the screen turned red before he calmed, she had failed, and she would be removed from the palace forever. A doctor carried Cale into the chamber. The boy looked so small in the middle of that giant dark room. He sat on the cold floor and hugged his knees. His golden eyes searched the glass wall until he found Sarah's face. She pressed her hand against the glass and mouthed the words, I'm right here. Then the storm began. White light exploded from every wall. Sound hit like a hammer, deep roaring thunder mixed with high screaming tones that bounced off every surface. The floor vibrated. The air itself seemed to shake. Cale screamed. He slammed his hands over his ears and fell sideways, curling into a ball, just like that day in the market. The medical screen lit up. His heart rates shot upward. The numbers climbed fast. The bar was yellow and rising toward red. Lady Vess leaned forward. Any moment now, she whispered. The far door opened, and Sarah stepped inches. The sound hit her like a wall. Her ears rang instantly. The light was so bright she could barely see. But she didn't cover her ears. She didn't shield her eyes. She started walking. 1 step. 2 steps. 3. She began to hum. At first, nobody could hear it over the roar of the storm. But Cale heard it. His head lifted from his knees. Through the blinding light and the terrible noise, he heard that sound. That warm, round, soft sound that no Veyron voice could make. The old lullaby from a small blue planet. Far away. Sarah walked through the storm like it was rain. 10 steps. 15. 20. The light burned her skinches. The sound made her nose bleed. She wiped it with the back of her hand and kept humming. 25 steps. The medical screen was almost red. Cale reached out both arms toward her. Sarah dropped to her knees and pulled him into her chest. She wrapped both arms around him tight. She pressed her mouth close to his ear and hummed louder, rocking him, counting softly. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, Cale whispered back. His hands let go of his ears. His two little hearts started to slow. One beat matched hers. Then the other. The medical screen stopped climbing. It held. Then, slowly, it dropped. Yellow. Green. Safe. The storm shut off. The chamber went dark and quiet. In the silence, every person behind the glass heard the same thing. Cale looked up at Sarah's bleeding, tear-streaked face. He reached up and touched her cheek, just like that first day in the market. And in a voice so clear it carried through the crystal walls, through the speakers, through the entire silent palace, the heir to the Veyron Empire spoke. Don't take my mother away. No one moved. No one breathed. Lady Vess's smile was gone. The nobles stared. The guards stared. Every single soul in that chamber stared. Then the Emperor Veyra did something that had not been seen in living memory. He walked down from his throne, crossed the chamber floor, and knelt beside the human woman holding his son. His voice was rough and quiet, and it cracked on the edges. The trial is over, he said. Then he looked at Sarah. Stay. Not as a servant. As family. And so the weakest creature in the galaxy became the most important person in the most powerful empire. Not because of claws, or armors, or weapons, because of a lullaby and a hug. The historians of Veyra would later write that the empire changed direction that day. Not because of war, not because of politics, because a human woman knelt in the dust and held a crying child when nobody else would. The great alien scholars studied it for years. They gave it long, complicated names. They wrote papers about frequency ranges and thermal biology and neural bonding. But Sarah Cole knew the truth. It was never science. It was the thing humans have carried since the very beginning. The thing no empire can build and no army can stop. Kindness. Simple, stubborn, reckless kindness. The kind that makes you walk into a storm with a bleeding nose because a child is scared. And the boy who once screamed at the touch of the whole world grew up strong, and wise, and kind. And every night, even when he was tall enough to reach the stars, he asked his mother to hum that old song one more time. She always did. If this story opened your eyes, then what comes next will shake you even deeper. So let's remember what we just witnessed. A woman everyone mocked turned out to be the one person an entire empire needed. A child the galaxy's greatest minds could not heal was calmed by the simplest thing in the universe, a warm heartbeat and a gentle voice. And an emperor who never bowed to anyone knelt beside a human and called her family. This is why we tell these stories. Because in a universe full of power and technology, humanity's real strength has always been something softer, something warmer, something the galaxy never saw coming. If this story moved you, smash that like button right now. It tells the algorithm to show this video to more people who need to hear it. Subscribe to HFYSCIFI and turn on that notification bell so you never miss a story. Every week, we bring you new tales of humanity standing tall in a universe that underestimates us. Drop a comment below and tell me this. If you were Sarah, would you have stepped out from behind that stall? Would you have walked into the storm? I want to hear your answer. And if you haven't seen our last video, where a human soldier was left behind on an alien prison planet and did the one thing no species expected, go watch it right now. The link is on your screen. That story will hit you just as hard as this one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this crew. And remember, in a galaxy full of monsters, sometimes the most dangerous thing you can be is kind. See you in the next one.